I had all kinds of things to deal with in Chicago.
This is real hard times out here for people.
You're not a resident. You either live here or you don't.
So if that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be.
It's a real nail-biter for those who love Chicago-style political drama. Mayor's chair is open, and while court battles have threatened to overshadow campaigns, Chicagoans need to know that their concerns will be heard. Well, that's what we're about. From my special guest tonight to your live phone calls. Plus, we're going to mayoral candidate William Doc Walls. Why are you running for mayor? This is off 63rd, Chicago, from the beach to the burbs. Chicago, welcome to a fresh and exciting show, especially for you. You're watching Off 63rd with Garrard McClendon, and every Thursday night, 6:30 p.m., we'll talk about our wonderful city, Chicago, and the people in it. Traveling by car or by internet today, listen to the show as we host Harold Lee Rush and our WKKC listeners at 89.3 FM and on the internet at www.wkkc.fm. on the radio simulcast. Off 6, the green light to exploring Chicago from the beach to the burbs, fusing public affairs, politics, education, and pop culture. We're interactive, so you can watch and call the show tonight. It's campaign time in the city as we count down a show mayoral election. There's no shortage of opinion regarding the mayoral race, but the one that matters most is the state Supreme Court's decision concerning Rahm Emanuel. Let's listen to the court of public opinion with the word on the street.
If he's still paying taxes here, if they take his money, they could take his nomination.
Serving the military, he would have been still a resident. He was serving for president, so yeah. I think he should.
I hope they say that he can run.
I'm not so sure about Emanuel, though.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes his commercials don't come across as really sincere. It's like he's reading from them or something.
He's lived all his life in Chicago. Okay. I mean, he took a position to help Obama out, you know, and he's got an opportunity to run for mayor. I say.
That's the word on the street. Later in the show, mayoral candidate Bill Doc Walls will be in the forum. But joining us right now for a spirited discussion on Chicago politics and its issues, our talk show host on the big 89 WLS AM, a commentator and a past Illinois gubernatorial candidate, Mr. Dan Proft. And in the mix with us tonight is a man who cannot live in Bridgeport, writer, comic, and co-host of syndicated Michael Vaisden show, Mr. Will Bourne. Gentlemen, welcome to Off 63rd.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having us.
You know what, fellas? We just find out that Supreme Court 7-0 decision on Rahm Emanuel being able to maintain his status on the ballot. He can run for mayor. Let me start with Dan first. Is he a resident? It's irrelevant now, but is he a resident, and is it fair in terms of the vote? What do you think?
Well, the Supreme Court, I mean, this is classic for Illinois. It's Republicans and Deming together to make a bad decision. And that's what I think the Supreme Court did in this case. I don't believe he qualifies under the residency law. The bottom line, I think that the critical piece is that he rented out his home. So by definition, he no longer intended to retire, which is why his petitions have another address. His nominating petitions had another address, and he clearly didn't have residency at that other address for a year prior to the election. So whether you agree with the residency law or not, everybody should abide the same law, and in this case, getting away with not abiding the same law.
Dan, I want to talk to you a little bit later about your scathing editorial on WLS's website, which was quite interesting. Let me go to George Wilborn. George, resident or not, Supreme Court says he's in. George Wilborn, what do you think?
Did what it's supposed to do, and that's to let the appellate court know what a horrible job it did. It's quite obvious to people who was born in this city, raised their children in this city, educated and worked in this city, and then to be called to do the duties of from the President of the United States to say, will you come work for me and work for this country, which last time I checked, I think Chicago is still in this country, to that be the reason that you consider them not, I think is absurd. I think the Supreme Court came down a ruling that they had to.
You know what, George, I want to come back, because you open up a can of worms here. I want to come back to Dan's comment, because I'm looking at the article here from the Sun-Times. It says, the novel standard adopted by the appellate court is without any foundation in Illinois law. This is the Supreme Court's ruling. Also, the objectors claim that once a person rents out a residence, he or she has abandoned it as a matter of law. The court's decision said this is obviously incorrect. Let's go to the editorial that I saw online. Dan, you're saying this is totally unfounded, and he should definitely be out of the mix. I mean, come on. If his driver's license says Chicago, come on, Dan.
Well, I mean, there's like the common sense standard, and then there's the execute. I mean, look, I don't necessarily, like I said, agree with the particulars of the residency law or some of the case history that the courts have relied on to make decisions. I mean, we've had candidates kicked off the ballot in this state for stapling their nominating petitions instead of binding them in a more permanent fashion. So, you know, the courts are very tough when it comes to the election statutes as written, except here. And I don't, you know, frankly, I don't appreciate the decision. I mean, it's typical of Chicago, which is the election law is what it is unless it impedes my guy from winning.
But it seems like
and that's the problem.
It seems like the appellate court did whatever they could to try to find a statute that would kick him off.
Okay, okay, great points, because we got some counterpoint here. So let's look at not only the statute and the decision that was made, let's look at this as a possible political setup. We see that Mayor Daley decides not to run, all right? It's almost like a chess game. Once he decides not to run, Rahm Emanuel, a few years, if Mayor Daley doesn't run, I'd be glad to be the mayor of Chicago. And then mysteriously, Mayor Daley's brother gets Rahm Emanuel's old job. Dan, was this an operative move that had purpose? And then, George, I want your feelings on this as well.
And don't forget, I mean, yeah, right, as you kind of alluded to, Rahm Emanuel on the Charlie Rose show this summer saying, oh, you know, someday I'd like to be mayor of Chicago, but of course only when Mayor Daley retires, and then 3 months later he retires. So it's certainly great fodder for conspiracy theorists. But I think the whole tenor of this conversation is so interesting to me, because it's like we're going to be deprived of something as Chicagoans if Rahm Emanuel's not allowed to run. We're not going to be deprived of anything. Just wait 4 years and you run in 2015 when you're clearly established your.
So what do we do in the meantime? What do we do with those 4 years? What candidate is the one that's going to clean up these streets and do something with the horrible educational system that we have here? Who does that? Or just go 4 years without?
No, Gary Chico is more qualified to be mayor than Rahm Emanuel.
In your opinion? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that I offer my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, this is, I'm loving this. We're going to take phone calls a little bit later. You know, get your questions or comments ready, because I'm giving you the call-in number in a moment. But let's discuss strengths and weaknesses of the individual candidate. You two gentlemen were headed into that direction. I mentioned, you mentioned Chico's name. Of course, we got Rahm Emanuel's name in the mix. Let's look at some of the other candidates. Strengths, weaknesses. Pick a candidate. Let's start with George. Pick a candidate. Give me some strengths and weaknesses.
I'm going to pick Rahm. I'm going to pick because I believe, first of all, he's proven himself to be one that can get things done. This city is in a situation right now where the education is horrible. You have kids. I have a 20-year-old. Dan, I think you said that you're not married and you don't have children. Dismiss what's important to you as a citizen of Chicago. But for a man who has a 20-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, education is crucial for me. It's important for my child to be able to be put in a position where they can prosper the best they can in life. That you need someone who's have a track record of getting stuff done. I like Rahm. I like the fact that he's tough on crime. He's going to. This is a city that you can't even, no matter almost any neighborhood you walk in.
But George, do you think Rahm Emanuel pay attention to education, though?
I think he will. I think he will pay attention to education. I think that it's important. He said that this is going to be one of the top priorities. He knows that the citizens of this city, it's not just me, they know. It's a call across where you look at where we are education-wise. The president just addressed it the other night. You know, it's something that we have to stop looking to avoid and say it's not a problem. It's a huge problem.
I agree.
I
agree. I mean, I may not have kids in the Chicago Public System, but I write about school reform all the time.
And you're still a taxpayer paying for schools.
But even forget even the taxpayers. I want kids to be given the skills they need to be successful, independent adults, and that is not happening in CPS right now. But Rahm Emanuel is an implementator. He is not an executive. That's what he has been all his career, an implementation tool for somebody else. Gary Chico, on the other hand, has been the school board president of CPS, and during those 6 years that he was, we advanced charter schools to introduce some competition, to give choice, to make the system better, at least have some more options. Now, CPS has a long way to go, and I don't agree agree with everything Gary Chico has said, but at least he's been heading up these agencies, and he has advanced policies that I think move the flag towards the very out-talking.
Gentlemen, we find out today that Chicago Public Schools has voted on adding additional charter schools into the mix in Chicago. Strong move? Is this a political move? Is this a way of public schools heading off other educational management corporations so they can keep the per pupil funding? What do you think, George?
I think one thing that we have to understand is that when it comes to public schools and the teachers that are in there, one of the toughest jobs in the world is to be a teacher. By the time the kids get to school, these teachers have to be a social worker. They've got to be a counselor. They've got to be a disciplinarian. They've got to be all these things before they get a chance to be a teacher. All right, and what we as citizens need to understand, people who have children, is that we are the defense and the teachers are the second line of defense. So by the time we come to the teachers, they're frustrated and burnt out at the 2-year mark, okay? They don't even want, and then a new teacher come in with a lot of energy, and he's talking to the old teacher. He's like, man, look, in 2 years, you're going to feel just like I do. I do something to offset
what
that.
What can the mayor do to improve schools? Is it more magnet? Is it more charter? Dan?
Well, let me put it this way. So everybody seems to agree that charter schools has been a positive innovation, that it's, you know, and they seem to be outperforming their neighborhood counterparts. But only 6% of CPS students, of the 400,000 kids in CPS, get access to a charter school.
Absolutely.
So if it's good enough for 6%, why isn't it good enough for the other 94%? What the next mayor should do, and Gary Chico has proposed kind of a very small step in this process of extending choice to 50,000 kids, what the next mayor should do is change the way money flows and who gets to make spending decisions to put money in the hands of parents to allow them to choose their child's education rather than being relegated to neighborhood schools that we know will fail them.
It's too many parents, though. There's so many parents that are not in a position to make those good decisions. And sometimes, I mean, there's a huge amount of parents who are children themselves.
We're assuming that the parents who do deserve to have the power for school choice, we're assuming that they're responsible parents.
And that they will make the right choice.
No, but you can't do worse than what's happening now.
Gentlemen, I got to interrupt you just one second. I do want you to kick back on your comment. Chicago, it's about time you give me a call. You can talk with Dan Proft. You can talk with George Wilborn. 773-487-3630. That's 773-487-3630. Call us now to express yourself. What are the biggest issues facing the new mayor? Okay, gentlemen, we're going to segue here. I do want to finish up with schools. Dan, you had a comment concerning schools.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, if you designed a system that's purpose was to not educate children, hardly do a better job than the Chicago public school system did. So the fact that some parents might not avail themselves of the choices that you would extend to them does not mean that you shouldn't avail choices to the other parents who would.
Okay.
I mean, it's just that simple.
Okay, now I'm glad you got to clarify that point. Here, some of your neighbors had to say concerning issues for the new mayor. Let's listen.
The most pressing issue is probably jobs. You know, so I mean, it's real hard times out. You know,
I've had several problems, especially with Chicago school systems and the education or the educational books and things that they bring to my children. They haven't been as challenging as the other schools, and that's my biggest problem.
The economy and local jobs.
So what are the biggest issues facing the new mayor? Gentlemen, let's get right into this. I've got a few comments here. Is it education, jobs, safety, the meter lease, $1.1 billion, or machine politics? Let me start with Mr. George Wilborn.
I think Illinois, Chicago is no different from most of this country. People are out of work, jobs, people are hurting. You know, they're trying to find ways to make ends meet. They're trying to find ways to say, okay, you know what, I got one person in the family that's working, and this person has lost a job, they've been laid off, and seems to want to hire them. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, how hard am I doing, and how much am I doing to make sure that I'm qualified and I'm getting into the workplace. But this next mayor have to deal with the situation of the lack of jobs. You have people around here saying, I want to work. You have very educated people that's got degrees on the wall, and they're still you know, shopping at the dollar store.
That's a good point. Dan, biggest issue in Chicago?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest long-term issue is education. You have to get K through 12 right, or you're not going to produce generations of people that are innovators, that are self-sustaining, that have the skills necessary to compete in the global economy. But the biggest short-term issue is the budget. This is a city precipice of bankruptcy, and so the next mayor's real challenge is: will he take on he or she take on the public sector unions? Will he restructure and rethink city government? Because you cannot afford a 36,000 employee, $6 billion government anymore. And like the United States, like the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago is spending more than it takes in. Eventually, that's not sustainable.
The public sector unions. Let's go to phone calls, gentlemen. I've got Bob on line 4. Bob, how are you this evening? What's your comment? Hi, Bob.
Yeah. I wanted to comment that I don't think Rahm, if he's elected, will really be hanging around that long. I think he has aspirations for the Senate and eventually the White House. So I think if he can be stopped at this point, either through the court, which obviously is letting him on now, or through the election to a more capable candidate, Chico, then we will save ourselves a lot of heartache down the road with another slick guy from Chicago.
Bob, thank you so much. Dan, George, Bob thinks that Rahm Emanuel is playing political hopscotch. Let me bounce like Peter Cottontail from this job to this office to this office. What do you think about him running for Senate? That's a possibility?
No, I think this is his last stop if he gets elected. I don't think he could get elected statewide in Illinois, much less nationally. So I think this is his play. This is, you know, the more interesting thing is, will the next mayor, be it Rahm Emanuel or somebody else, transitionary figure, be a one-termer? And a lot of that is going to depend on, are they willing to make the tough decisions that right-size city government and balance the budget? We'll see.
Well, he will be the next mayor, no doubt.
You think that Rahm Emanuel is the next mayor?
And not only will it not be a one-term mayor, but he's probably going to fall in the footsteps of the Dailies. He's probably going to be the mayor for this city for a very, very long time.
So no Mosley Braun, no Chico, no DeValier, no Doc Wall, and Pelt Watkins? It's Rahm Emanuel? You know what? I'm going to go back to phones. Let's go to Les. Les, you're on off 63rd with Garrard McClendon and these wonderful gentlemen here. Les, what's on your mind this evening?
I want to tell you, I love your program. Thank you. The Chicago program. George, you're brilliant, like in the tradition of my good friend Aaron Freeman. And Dan, of course, I'm on your email list.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
The comment I wanted to make was the inequality of ballot access in this corrupt state of Illinois. Rahm Emanuel, I think, should be on the ballot. However, he is in violation of the statute. As Dan pointed out, the address on his nominations, he has never lived there, let alone in the last year. Now, in my case, Dan, you may know my name, Les Cut the Taxes Golden. The state of Illinois passed a law specifically denying me ballot access, and this case refers only to me, where someone with a nickname that is a slogan cannot appear on the ballot even though he went to the court and legally changed his name.
Hey, Les, I gotta go. Thanks for the phone call, Les. This is very interesting. I see, Dan, you've got that pensive look on your face.
No. I mean, I think that's a really important point that he makes. Look, ballot access should be easier. I mean, ironically, at the statewide level, to run for statewide office, you need 5,000 signatures. To run for mayor of the city of Chicago, you need 12,005.
Unbelievable.
So, I mean, it's onerous. It's the difference between what should be and what is.
Yeah.
And what is, I think, should have kept Rahm off the ballot. What should be is a different conversation.
Yeah. Hold tight, Mr. George Wilborn. I know you like to talk, so does Dan Proft. We got to go to break. Stay with us on Off Third. In less than a minute, mayoral candidate Bill Doc Walsh joins us in the forum. Stay with us. He's a mayoral candidate, grassroots organizer, and was a highly instrumental operative in the election of Mayor Harold Washington. Joining us in the forum is candidate for mayor Bill Doc Walls. Doc Walls, welcome to Off 63rd. Thanks for coming. You know, the main question to ask you, why is Bill Doc Walls running for mayor? Talk to me, Doc.
Because I'm the only real solutions to the problems that we face in the city of Chicago.
That's a nice cliche, but give me something very specific. Give me one thing that's specific.
For example, the city of Chicago hasn't had an industry to call its own since the demise of the stockyards. We were the hog butcher of the world. And then after it's collapsed, we went over to Gary, Indiana, and piggybacked off of the steel mills. We haven't had our own industry since the steel mills declined and we came back home to higher than usual unemployment, 60% in Inglewood, Lawndale, Woodlawn. We need a new, next big industry is nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is the process by which you make products that are cleaner, lighter, stronger, and more precise. It's the next big step after Silicon Valley.
But can you get nanotechnology right here in the Midwest? It's obvious West Valley, they've carved this niche. So have the institutions such as MIT and in the Boston area. But when it comes to Chicago, is this just industrial town? I mean, we're gonna have to shift into technology?
Well, no. Okay, we have University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Northwestern University, IIT, DePaul University, Loyola. We have a great city college system. We have Argonne Laboratories, Fermi Laboratories. We're the transportation hub of North America.
Okay,
we've got vacant factories. Nanotechnology is where the silicon chips meets manufacturing. It's the process of building from the bottom up and not the top down. So this is ideally situated.
Okay, so you claim to be the only candidate out there in the wilderness, and I'm going to sick these two on you. so get ready, Doc. I want to shift gears because I'm in agreement with you thus far. Sure. All right, but let's talk about the polling. 1%, 1 to 2%. Doc Walls is getting in the polls. Why doesn't Walls pack his bags and get out with Dr. Patricia Van Pelt-Watkins? Leave and let the other candidates have the votes. What do you think, Doc?
That's interesting. First of all, they don't poll real people. They don't poll people with cell phones. They don't poll my voting base, which is the disenfranchised, people who probably don't even have a landline or a cell phone. So my people will turn out and vote for us in huge fashion. I got 10% of the vote in the last election. We'll more than double that this time around.
I'm going to open it up to this forum. Dan, George, have any questions for, not necessarily Doc, but just any mayoral candidate, but ask Doc the question.
I'm curious, Doc, when you talk about the nanotechnology, which we all agree is huge, and those factories that may produce the product. What about the blue collar person? How many people in Chicago that needs a job today, if you was to open up one of these factories, have the capacity to go in there and get a job doing what you're going to be our way to the future?
Everybody. Nanotechnology is just building the same products that we ordinarily build, just building them in a smarter, more efficient manner. So you got factories that require laborers, machinists, tool folks. You have the same thing that you have in any other factory. It's just less waste.
Oh, okay, this is interesting because you still have to answer his question as it pertains to geographical positioning in the United States and the geographical positioning of people who have college degrees.
Absolutely.
Dan, you got a question for Bill Doc Walls?
I think one of the real issue is not necessarily these are the types of businesses we'd like to have in Chicago. It's what is it that's, from a policy perspective, what is it that we're going to Chicago an attractive place to locate these businesses in terms of the tax and spending structure, the business climate here that's particularly hostile, which is why Illinois, and Chicago's a big part of it, is 48th in the nation in job creation the last decade.
Well, you can bet I'm going to do everything that I can do. Taxes low in Chicago. In Chicago, you can either cut services, increase taxes, or increase your revenue. We're going to increase our revenue. We're going to grow Chicago's revenue base by launching
Doc, how can you keep taxes low when you're subject to a county board? I mean, is it going to have to be a strange bedfellow situation where you have to kind of hug up with Tony Preckwinkle?
Well, certainly you have to cooperate with the county board, but you also have to get businesses engaged in the national and global economy. Launch them out, put their products, goods, and their services in the stream of the national and global economy and bring new money, jobs, and revenue back to the city of Chicago.
The taxes are so hard with Illinois right now. You have governors like the governor of New Jersey running ads here in Chicago. Businesses, come here to New Jersey. That's how bad it is here in Illinois. We are in a really horrible situation, and Chicagoans We're the hub. We're the center of all of this.
Yeah.
Taxes are important, but it's location, location, location. Chicago is still the center of the world.
Let me take one more phone call. We've got a caller on the line. Thanks for calling off 63rd. What's your comment or question?
This is Dr. My comment is to piggyback off of the comment that Doc Walls made concerning nanotechnology. I am a person who is disabled that used to work in technology. You have a ready-made workforce right here among the disabled community and qualified seniors as well as blue-collar workers. We can open up those factories. I think that I understand clearly what Doc Walls is talking about. We have so much empty factories over in Elton. Many of us are not as dumb as the world thinks we are, and forgive me to anyone who is offended by that. They don't use us. They use us for volunteer work. They tap our brains. You know, they give us handouts and then want to put us in nursing homes.
That's valid. Thanks for the phone call. We appreciate that. She says that the educational environment's good. There's people here that can do these types of jobs. Agree, Doc?
Well, keep in mind, this is a place where the atom bomb was created. Nuclear fusion, nuclear fission. We're good at doing things that have never been done before.
To blow up the world, Doc? To blow the world up?
But nanotech is going to solve the problems that we have.
Yeah. What is it? Give me the reason that a business is going to start here or locate here as opposed to Wisconsin or Indiana or New Jersey or most of the other states that have a better, a more hospitable tax and spending.
A factory infrastructure base that's sitting vacant. We have places that would have gone for $40 a square foot in the past, but they now go for $10 a square foot. And we have a rail hub that allows them to export their products out of the city of Chicago into the stream of commerce. So Chicago is not as bad off. Let's quit talking gloom and doom. That's why we need me as mayor of the city of Chicago, because I have the vision necessary to move this city forward and make Chicago forever economically
But Doc,
viable.
Rahm Emanuel is back.
Emanuel's like Walmart. A lot of stuff from outside coming in and nothing new. He's average. When people hear Rahm Emanuel talk, they're not going to be impressed.
Interesting.
But how much money has Steve Spielberg given you?
Well, I don't need Steve's money. I've got the people of the city of Chicago. I've got votes.
You know, you say you have votes, Doc, but when we look at the top 2, top 4 candidates, they may have more votes. Doc, why don't you just drop out now?
According to the media. That's a
media
that's great.
is the message,
the
Doc.
The media is just one component. There are 5 stages to a campaign. Management, message, money, media, and manpower. They're just one small component, and they can't hoodwink everybody. I'm the thinking person's candidate.
In all due respect, Doctor, you know I've known you for years. And I know you to be a very good man, and I know you to be a highly intelligent person. But one thing I want, and I think a lot of people want, they want honesty. They want realism, you know, and I think, you know, and he's saying, kind of saying, Cheek, why would you drop out? But I mean, I need someone as a father to be realistic. Realistic in where we can go, realistic in what we can do.
So give me an example of one Rahm Emanuel policy that stresses that.
Excuse me?
Give me an example of one Rahm Emanuel policy that you would agree with that stresses that.
Well, you know what? I agree with several things, policies. For example, the policies that he wants to implement as far as cleaning up the crime in Chicago.
He's the only one that has a policy to clean up crime.
You asked me to name one. I'm giving you one.
And Doc, we can see his policy on TV and commercials.
Or go online. He's got every one of the policies.
His promises of spending more money.
I can give you 1, I can give you 2, I can give you 3.
You know what, gentlemen? We're running out of time. No, check this out. I need it quickly. I need George Wilborn. Who's the next mayor of Chicago?
Rahm Emanuel will be the next mayor of Chicago.
Dan Proft, next mayor of Chicago?
Well, there's what I hope happens and there's what I think will happen.
What do you think will happen?
Probably Rahm.
Who's the next mayor of Chicago?
Bill Doc Walls.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Hey, the time goes so quickly. Gentlemen, before we end, congratulations to the Chicago Defenders Men of Excellence honorees tonight. A big thanks to my guests tonight, Dan Proft, George Warren, and Bill Doc Walls, for being on Off 63rd. And we thank you at home for watching WYCC, giving you public affairs, politics, education, and pop culture. Thank you for watching Off 63rd tonight. Chicago from the beach burbs. I need you to stay positive, keep your head up, and always be encouraged. We'll see you next week.